In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the PowerShell module Pester to set up API tests using Azure DevOps pipelines and Azure Key Vault for secrets storage. Okay, so for this video, we're going to go ahead and just use the same project I used in my previous video, and that is the Mountainbike project. They have a free API that you can use, and they give you a free API key, so you just sign up for it and they give you one, and I'll use this as my basis for showing you how to create Pester tests. We'll quickly create something out of this. Alright, so first things first, let's get into our terminal. Alright, so let's go ahead and start up PowerShell. I'm on a Mac. So I'll just type in pwsh, and as of this video, the current version of PowerShell is 7.0.2. So I'm going to go ahead and just type in the API key. Of course, you're not going to see my API key. So now that I have my API key, I'll assign it to that variable API key. And now I can do an invoke REST method. And the method is get, and the URI. I'll go back over here to the API. So in the example that they give you, I'm going to use that. Obviously, I'm going to use my own API key, so I'll just get this. Go back to our terminal over here. Quotation sign, paste it in here, but instead of copying the key directly, I'm just going to use $API key, which is what we set the variable in the previous step to. So now if we hit enter, we should get the response, but that's not very helpful. We need to do something with that. So I'm going to assign it to a variable, just call it response equal. So now if I type in $response dot, and then here we have trails, right? We want to be able to see this. So I'm going to hit enter, trails. And you see that invoke REST method will parse the response. The response is in JSON format. So, and this is the same thing if we go back to the site. This is the same thing that you're seeing here, except now it's in a PowerShell object. So that's very useful. And once I've got data that I want to test, then what else can we do with this? One thing is we can type in response trails, right? But I want the first object, so I'm going to use this. So open bracket 0. And then closing bracket, and this returns the first object in that list. And then from this, I want to get the properties. There's different ways to do this. You can say, for example, a pipe and then get member, and that gives this. Okay, so it gives you all the different properties. So ascent, condition date, condition details, so all of this stuff that you also see on the site, it returns it here. So you can see what are the different object properties. Another way to do this, .ps object .properties, right? So same thing, just a different format. But let's say I'm only interested in the name. Oops. Select object name, type name of value. I want to see what only that. Okay, so it returns this nice little table here. So probably the first test that I would want to come up with is testing for this. Testing to make sure that, you know, the response is returning the correct types. If I'm going to test an API, I like to start off with PowerShell because it gets me there really quickly. I don't have to install all kinds of crazy dependencies. It's built into PowerShell, and I can quickly parse and browse and traverse. I don't know what term you want to use, but I can go through the JSON response really easily. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create an Azure Key Vault for this. Now, I already, in my previous video, I created a Mountainbike Project resource group already. So we'll use that. So I'll skip the step on creating the resource group. But that's a prerequisite. So I'm gonna just go ahead and create my key vault. Okay, looks like that's done. Let me clear my screen here. All right, so now we're going to create our secret. Okay, my secret has been created. So again, the purpose of this is because we want to use this secret from Azure Key Vault, retrieve it through Azure DevOps, and use it in our tests. Okay, let's go ahead and create a new repo. So you go to Repos, bring the drop-down menu that's at the top, click on New Repository. We're going to call this MTB Project Pester Test, or Pester. Yeah, Pester Tests. And we're going to initialize it with a blank README. All right, so now we're going to create a new file. So click on this drop-down menu, click on New File, and we're going to call this MTB Project.tests.ps1. So let's go ahead and create it. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create our first test here. And the way there's a certain structure for Pester tests. I'm not going to go over the details of that. I'm assuming you already know how to create Pester tests. So the first one I'm going to do is create the describe section here. I'm going to call it get trails. And then the next section is before all. And the reason I have this is, or the way we're going to put the REST call here, because we don't want the REST call to be part of the it sections or the testing section. So we want to run this before we actually run the tests. And of course, this is going to be an invoke REST method. Method is going to be get, and then URI. We're going to grab it from here. I'm going to grab everything except the API key, double quotation, and since we're going to use the library group, we're just going to go ahead and type in $env API key. So the API key that I'm going to retrieve from Azure Key Vault is going to be set as an environment variable. That way this test can easily use that API key. Okay, the next section is context. And this is just a naming convention so that you can separate your tests a little bit further and make them easier to read. So this context will be check types. So this is where I'm going to check the property types. Or I guess I should call it check property types. And under the context, I'm going to have the actual tests. So again, I'm going to use what we saw in the PowerShell. The first test I'm going to create is going to test the object properties. So for each one of these properties, I'm going to check for their types. So we're going to type in it. ID is int. Now this is going to take me a while, so I'm just going to fast forward it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, whatever response the response has and whatever trails, just like when we did the REST request, REST method, I'm just going to use whatever object is the first one in the list, and then I'm going to use that to test the types. Okay, so I think I've got this first test done here. So I just had this in my separate window here. But basically I mirrored everything that's in the object, in the test object that I was running in PowerShell. I converted it to a test here. And so basically, just to give you a quick overview of what this does, is I'm testing to make sure that the response is returning the object that it returns is returning proper properties types for each one of the items that are returned within an object. So this 0 denotes it's the first object. So whatever comes back, whatever's listed first, that's the one we're going to use. And of course, this response is coming from this response over here. So it's saying go to the trails, give me the first object, give me its ID, make sure it's an integer, the name, make sure it's a string, the type is a string, summary is a string, blah blah blah, string 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 string. Some are doubles, ascent is integer, longitude and latitude are doubles. Okay, now I've got my tests ready. I'm going to go ahead and just commit this first test here. I'm going to leave the default commit message. Yes, I'm going to commit directly to master because I'm the only one working on this. Okay, so I've got my first test. Okay, so now we're ready to create our pipeline. But before we do, I want to connect the Azure Key Vault API key secret to this pipeline. And you do that by going to Pipelines, Library, and I'm going to click on Variable Group. Give it a name. And I'm going to click on Link Secrets from Azure Key Vault as Variables. I'm going to select my subscription, my Key Vault name, and of course, since this is the first time I'm using it here, it's going to say that I need to authorize it, so click on Authorize. You're going to be prompted to log in. So what this is doing is it's adding the permissions to your service principal. Okay, so now it's connected it. Now we can add our variable, and that's the API key we created. Okay, so now that's going to be available to our pipeline that we're going to create now. Let's click Save. All right, so let's go back to our repo. And then we're going to click on Setup Build. Starter pipeline. Erase the junk. Erase more junk. The first thing we need to do is, I'm not going to use Ubuntu, I'm going to use Windows, because I was having problems with the Ubuntu one. And I'm going to add some spaces here. And what I need to do is I need to add the variable group. So we add a variable section here. Group. And MTB project. Bars. And in here, we're going to use the assistant here. Say PowerShell inline, and error action. I'm going to click on continue. The reason I want to do that is because if invoke Pester fails, I don't want it to fail the entire pipeline. I want it to still save the results. So I'm going to go ahead and just tell it to continue. I'm going to leave this here for now. Okay, so here we have the task. And I'm going to give it my own name. Run tests. Okay, so the first thing I want to do in the script is I want to use the API key inside Pester. And the only way that I figured out how to do that was to do it through an environment variable. So I'm going to grab the API key that's in Azure Key Vault that's going to get set. And I'm going to set it as an environment variable. So environment API key equals, and this is important, you must put quotation marks, otherwise it won't work. Then $ API key. Okay, so again, this is going to assign the library group variable API key that we're grabbing from Azure Key Vault, and we're setting it as an environment variable so that the rest of the script can use it. The first thing we want to do is, I don't want to make the assumption that Pester is installed on this, on the Microsoft hosted machine, so I'm going to make sure it is. So find module. Okay, so this section takes care of installing the Pester module. And now that we have Pester installed, we need to invoke our tests. And we do that by running invoking Pester. Provided the path. I'm going to use the full path. All right, so now we're going to specify where we're going to put our Pester test results. And then now we need to also specify the output format. And so this is going to be NUnit. And actually, let's not forget about the backtick. So this backtick basically ties this as a single command, so I can use it in multi-line. So I don't have to put it as a single line all the way. I can just tie it all together as one single line when it runs. Same thing as in Linux \. And then I want it to be verbose because if something goes wrong, I want to get the details. Let me click on settings, see what it shows here. Okay, yeah, it looks good. And let's create another task because although I'm telling it to output the format of NUnit XML, Azure DevOps is not going to pick this up automatically. You have to tell it to publish. And we'll do that by using the assistant. So we'll search for the publish test results task. We're going to select NUnit. We're going to copy the full path of the XML file. Make sure you go down here, hit add. I want to give it a display name. Publish results. I guess we could just say this. Yeah, because it's already going to the default working directory. And I think we're good, actually. We should be able to run this. So let's go ahead and hit save and run. I'm going to leave the commit message. You can change it if you want. And I'm directly committing to master. Save and run. Okay, so this kicks off the job. Let's click on the output, see what happens. Okay, looks like it's done. Let's go ahead and look at the test run. And we can go to the test tab up here for this particular pipeline run. And we can see that we have a total of 23 tests, 3 failed. It looks like it took over just a second. And I've got some failures here. So if we wanted to drill into what the actual problem was, you'll see that it failed on all of these that say double. And it should be double, but I'm not sure what it returned. Okay, so I took a look at the Pester documentation, and it looks like I probably made a mistake. What I should be doing is using be of type. I should be using should be of type and then the type. Whereas right now, I'm doing it this way. So we'll start off with int. So any of these, so should be of type int, right? And then string should be of type string. And then double should be of type double. Let's just quickly look at this. Looks like all of them were changed. Let's go ahead and commit this. Just give it a quick commit message here. Commit it. And once you commit, since I have my pipeline triggering on master, should have already triggered a test run. Let's take a look at it. Well, it's still filled. Return the value, and it's decimal. Okay, fine. We'll switch it to decimal. Not a problem. Okay, let's go back to our repo, tests. Decimal. Commit this change. It's going to trigger the pipeline run test run. Let's go to our test run. Now I haven't used Pester in a very long time, so I'm gonna make a few mistakes here and there. That's okay. Just like with any other coding project, that's the whole point of iterating. Looks like it's already completed. I don't know why Azure DevOps does this sometimes, where it doesn't refresh. Let's go to our job here. Let's go to the results. All tests pass. Looks like. How do we know? Let's go to our test run here. Click on tests. And we see that all of them passed. And we get a little trophy. And it took 663 milliseconds, so that's pretty fast. Another way to look at the test results is you can go to a test plan section, click on runs, and you can see this is the last test run I just did right now. Click on it. Similar to view as to what you see in the pipeline. Okay, so here we see the XML file. Outcome is that all of them passed. Test results. Here are the actual tests, so you can actually drill down. So it's pretty nifty, free. I can go to this individual test. Looks good here. If I were to find a bug, I can report it from here, but that's beyond the scope of this video. So you can just click create bug and all that. Plus, I'm using the free version, so I'm not going to set up the test plans. They give you a free trial, but I'm not going to do that. Okay, so I don't want to take up the whole video, generating more tests. I think from here on, it's pretty easy to build upon this. And, obviously, besides API tests, you can do functional tests, with Selenium or something like that. Maybe that'll be another video. But for now, I think this is good. I think this will help some of you get started with Pester, Azure DevOps, and Azure Key Vault. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.